Good afternoon, everyone, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Debbie Madeley, and I'm the Development Director for the North Suburban YMCA. It's my pleasure to welcome you to the National Healthcare Decisions Day presentation hosted by Maureen Rafa. Maureen is a board-certified psychiatric mental health nurse currently working as an elder care coordinator for the law offices of Steven Sutera, PC, and elder law attorney. Experienced in mental health, geriatrics, managed care, home health, and hospice, Maureen helps clients navigate healthcare and aging in place by connecting clients with equipment and services for their home or assisting with the transition to senior living facilities. The YMCA Education Series is free and open to the public, and as a 501c3 charity, we do rely on fundraising to help us serve the community. If you enjoyed today's presentation and want to help us continue to offer free programs like this, we welcome your donations. You can visit our website at nsymca.org and hit the Give button, or you can also browse our site and see all the offerings that we have for our community. The YMCA Education Series programs typically last an hour. Maureen will take questions during the end of the presentation. If everyone could mute themselves during the presentation so that background noise doesn't interfere, you can then unmute yourself when it's open for questions. Enough about the why. You came here to learn about advanced planning, and with no further ado, I give you Maureen Rafa. And
Thank you so much.
My screen. And
excellent. Okay. So today is National Decisions Day, and that's why we're doing this presentation. So our objectives, of course, are to gain knowledge of what documents are included in advanced directives and learn what to consider when choosing powers of attorney and find out what to do with those completed documents. And then also to learn about having the difficult conversation to kind of plan for end of life, plan to have these documents done before the crisis occurs. Next. And I have no conflicts of interest. Next. So this presentation is actually based on the Conversation Project, an initiative of the Institute for Healthcare Improvement, a not-for-profit organization that is a leader in health and healthcare improvement worldwide. Next. So what is an advance directive? Well, the first one, of course, is a written statement that expresses one's medical care decisions when one is no longer able to speak for oneself. So that's your healthcare power of attorney. And a living will expresses your end-of-life care wishes in writing. So it's what you do want done, what you don't want done, when is enough enough. The POLST, P-O-L-S-T, is the physician orders for life-sustaining treatment. This is the newest document, but it's been around a few years already, that replaces the old DNR, do not resuscitate form. And then there's a financial or property written statement. Next. So the healthcare power, you as the principal maintain the power to make decisions so long as you have capacity. You give your agent, the person that you've picked, specific directions about the healthcare you want or don't want. The agent cannot be your healthcare professional, though, or provider. And your witnesses should not be the person that you have named as your agent. It's preferable even to have 2 witnesses. And one should always have a backup agent in case the primary won't or can't act when they need to. Oh, wait, we skipped a page. There we go. So is healthcare power of attorney permanent? No. One can cancel the POA at any time by telling someone or putting it in writing and then destroying the previous one. And if you have given your healthcare POA to your doctors, you should definitely make sure the doctor's offices have removed the old one that you revoked. And that would be true of your agents and anybody that you've given a copy to. But one must have capacity to make decisions in order to make changes. So what is decisional capacity? This is having the ability to consent to or refusal of diagnostic and treatment interventions. Whether or not an individual has the capacity to understand, make a decision, and take responsibility for the consequences is a clinical determination. Capacity can fluctuate during the day or from one day to the next, especially with somebody with early dementia. They still very well may have capacity most of the time, and that's okay. It's also important to weigh what type or the degree of importance of the decision that's being considered. Like, for instance, if somebody has started chemo, but then they no longer want it, they have that right to stop. The same with somebody who's maybe on dialysis. So they start looking at quality versus quantity of time left in their life. Okay, so what are some of the red flags that tell you a person does have decreased capacity? They're showing cognitive, physical, general, or social functioning deficits, right? They've decreased their eating habits. Their personal hygiene is not the same, or the cleanliness of their environment. The ability to handle money matters. They're not paying their bills on time. Late notices are piling up, or they're, not balancing a checkbook that maybe they used to balance to the penny every month. Disorientation. What are some critical red flags? Signs of potential harm to self or others, or alcohol-specific indicators. I should say alcohol and other drugs. Next. So living will. That this is another advanced directive, and it tells your healthcare professional and family and POA whether you want death delaying procedures used. It only applies if you have a terminal condition. Terminal means it's incurable and that death is imminent, meaning 6 months or less. And even if you have a signed living will, food and water cannot be withdrawn if it would be the only cause of death. Kind of an exception is if we're going to talk about the dementia addendum. In that case, it will be okay, or it may be okay. And if you have both the POA healthcare and the living will, then your POA agent makes the decisions if you can't. And people's wishes really should be honored if at all possible. So often though, the consumer, the regular person, getting all these documents don't always fully understand. But more importantly, their power of attorney doesn't understand when it actually becomes effective. And of course, it becomes effective when it's been determined that the person no longer has capacity, and a medical professional, a doctor, is going to make that decision. Next. So this dementia provision addendum that I mentioned, once completed, it should be kept with the healthcare power of attorney. And people who have early dementia, but have capacity, or people that believe they may develop it, maybe based on family history, etc., they may complete this document. But there's specific choices that one checks off. Examples: they may only want to receive comfort care. They can decline antibiotics if they develop an acute infection, because it's very common for somebody with end-stage dementia that the cause of death is actually pneumonia from immobility, or aspiration pneumonia, because it's gone into the lungs, right, instead of down into the esophagus and stomach. Stop any meds or treatment that may prolong life. Next. Also, stop food and fluids if I am indifferent to being fed, no longer appear to desire to eat or drink, and do not voluntarily open mouth to accept it, or I turn my head away to avoid being fed. I spit out food or fluids. I cough, gag, choke, which can lead to aspiration, and the negative consequences of continued feeding and drinking as determined by a medical provider outweighs the benefits. And the medical community, in the last 20 years, they've come a long way with end-stage dementia. And so they don't even really promote or encourage people to have a feeding tube in place, because actually you can still aspirate even from a feeding tube, which is good news, I think, personally. Next. There's another document, not technically an advanced directive in the traditional sense. It's a declaration for mental health treatment, but it is legal and it allows people to plan ahead for mental health services they might receive and to say how they want to be treated or not be treated when they lack capacity to make informed decisions about their mental health treatment. Couple of considerations, where they can specify or the use of psychotropic medications or ECT, electroshock treatment for serious depression that hasn't responded to medications. Next. And we have the POLST, P-O-L-S-T, the Practitioner Orders for Life-Sustaining Treatment. Now, this is something that you don't necessarily have to do ahead of time. It could be when you actually have been diagnosed with a terminal illness, or, you just have had a chronic illness and you are really declining. Anyway, what the PULSE does, it has like 5 sections. So the first one is to decide if you want cardiopulmonary resuscitation, CPR, right? Where your heart stops and your breathing stops. So you either want it or you don't want it. And if you choose that you don't want it, you will automatically in the next section go to selective treatment to treat some, but don't intubate. But you might still want IVs and antibiotics. If you've chosen to have CPR, you're going to probably check the full treatment to sustain life. And some people do choose that. They want to fight till their last breath, and that's okay because that's their decision. Or you might choose just comfort measures only to relieve pain and suffering. But there's required signatures for this form to be in effect. You or your POA, if you're not able, or your guardian must sign, as well as your attending practitioner and a witness that is 18 and older. And the Illinois Department of Public Health, IDPH, has a uniform POLST on their website. And you can just go to idph.gov and then put in POLST, and the form will pop up for you. Next. Then the other advanced directive is a financial or property power of attorney. And this gives a person the legal authority to act on your behalf in financial matters. Again, one should name a backup agent. The agent one chooses needs to be trustworthy and fiscally responsible. And it may be limited to a single purpose, such as the sale of a home or the purchase of a car, or it may be expanded to include many additional matters, such as paying one bills when they can no longer do that. Next. So this POA does end upon one's death, the financial one. And this is where a last will and testament, and hopefully you've done that too, even though it's not really considered an advanced directive, it is part of estate planning, so it's important. And this controls the assets of the deceased person. In other words, tells the world how things are going to be distributed, whatever assets or money are left, who's getting what. So the financial POA handles, it can be as specific as you want, money matters while one is still alive, but then once you can't handle it, that's when the POA takes over. But then upon death, it is the will and testament and the executor that's been named in that will who takes over. Now that may or may not be the same person as your financial person. It doesn't have to be, it could be a different person. But then the executor is making those decisions after death and making sure that what's in that will has been carried out. And this, and if there is no will, chaos can ensue. State could end up with the assets. It does go to probate. And I guess probate can be not only time consuming, but costly as well. Next. So what to consider in selecting your POAs? Well, you want to make sure they meet the legal criteria in your state for the role, over 18 and not your healthcare provider. They would be willing to speak on your behalf. So you have to be the person has to be a strong advocate, maybe with the MD or the institution, somebody who is very comfortable being assertive, asking questions, would be able to act on your wishes and separate their feelings from yours. lives close by, or could travel to be at your side if needed, and knows you well and understands what's important to you. Next, more considerations. Definitely someone you trust with your life and your assets, because you literally are putting your life and your assets in their hands. We'll talk with you now about sensitive issues, and we'll listen to your wishes, while you're still able. Will likely be available a long time into the future, and hopefully somebody that's going to outlive you, and would be able to handle conflicting opinions, which can happen between family members, friends, and the medical personnel. So that's where that assertive, strong person who can take the emotion out of it, and make those decisions. Next. So what to do with these documents once you've completed them? Well, you want to keep the original in a safe place, preferably a home safe, because then people can get at it. Hopefully you've given the key or the combination to somebody, but you can always break open a home safe, I guess. Easier than safe deposit box in the bank. And you want to make sure your primary care physician has a copy. Any specialist that you see frequently has a copy. Obviously your health and financial agents. And when admitted to a hospital, nursing home, assisted living, or memory facility, that staff is also provided a copy. And if you have signed advance directives, do not sign new ones at the hospital. Remember, anytime you're admitted in a facility, they ask the question. So if you say, no, you don't have it, when you know you do, and then they have you sign another one, it just adds to confusion. So you do not want to sign new ones if you know you've got everything in place. So more things to do with completed documents. Next. Keep a card in your wallet, or it could even just be a typed card or paper that you've signed that says you have advance directives. And you want to review them every few years. When a loved one dies, if you divorce, when you are diagnosed with a serious health condition, or when you experience a significant decline of an existing health condition, especially if it diminishes your independence. Because remember, anybody 18 and older can complete powers of attorney and a living will. But especially, probably especially more so is important is the POAs, because, these kids go off to college, accidents happen, they get sick, they're in the hospital, and then nobody has access, right, to talk to the medical people. So next. So does one choose one agent for both healthcare and financial POAs? Would the healthcare agent be able to handle the conflicting opinions between family, friends, and medical personnel? Does this person have adequate financial understanding? Are they fiscally responsible with their own assets? If one chooses two different agents for their POAs, do those two agents get along? And will that financial agent pay for the healthcare services when needed? And this does happen. It becomes a crisis when you have the two different ones and they don't necessarily get along, or they just have a differing viewpoint, because sometimes they refuse to pay for the healthcare that healthcare POA has decided is needed and would be honoring the person's wishes. So this is where it's really important to choose wisely, because people too often pick their spouse. But then maybe that spouse, when it's the true crisis, really isn't able to follow through on the wishes. They panic. And maybe the children, depending on when you've completed these forms, and if you haven't reviewed them in a while, maybe things have happened with one of those adult children. Maybe they've developed a gambling problem in the meantime, or a drug or alcohol problem. And then they're going to be looking out for feeding their own habits instead of spending the money on paying bills and getting care that may be needed. And even the same with an executor. So the people that you pick, you can't emphasize enough. You have to pick wisely, but also review. If you've done these early in life, which very few people do, by the way, They do need to be periodically reviewed to see if there's any changes needed. Next. So what happens if no POA and you're unable to express your wishes? Well, without a plan, you have lost control. You haven't completed the documents, and now you've become incapacitated, and family may have to go through costly or time-consuming court proceedings to appoint a guardian. However, in Illinois, there is a hierarchy of a spokesperson allowed under the Surrogacy Act if there's no POAs, and that would be a guardian. Then the next one down would be the spouse or a partner of registered civil union, any adult son or daughter, either parent. Again, this would be probably somebody that is younger and their parents are still alive, any adult brother or sister, any adult grandchild, a close friend, guardian of the estate, or a temporary custodian. Next. So I just realized I don't know your wishes, right? If something were to happen to you. So you want to have the conversation and encourage others to plan and talk to their family to have the conversation. Next. Communication is the single most important step in healthcare planning. Talk about your wishes with the people who may have to speak for you. No matter what your advance directive says, others will not fully understand your wishes. So the more you talk, the easier it will be for everyone to respect your wishes when the time comes. And I also recommend people do like a HIPAA form, and you can pull this off the website. I think you can just put probably, it might be under IDPH actually. I believe there might be a generic copy under that. And complete that because while most places like a bank and the hospital, MDs are going to honor a POA, maybe the insurance carrier, they should, but maybe not. So it's just like another added safety net to make sure that the people you've asked to speak for you are able to actually get the information they need or communicate the information that they need to. Next. So how do we start the conversation? Well, you might want to start with the story of someone else's experiences, knowing the difficulty they had because plans weren't made ahead and the chaos that ensued and the conflict and the fights because different people in the family had, differing opinions. You can blame it on your attorney. He says, I need to do this to prevent a crisis. Because people in the United States are not comfortable discussing death or end-of-life wishes, and yet it's a part of life. And so it is important, we plan everything else in our life, right? Education, weddings, showers, when to have kids. But for some reason, we don't want to plan our death. Some people, about 30% of the population, do take the time to do it. And boy, what a gift that is to their loved ones to have everything thought about, worked out. And then there's no arguing because you're honoring your mom's wishes or your dad's wishes. There are actually some MDs who do not want to honor patients' wishes. Again, they're keeping their own feelings and trying to influence with their feelings and their values. And that's not okay if a patient differs from their values or feelings. I don't know how many watch Dr. Chicago Bed and Dr. Halstead, who's an ER physician, but he's had a couple of run-ins on the show because he doesn't want to honor that DNR, right? The do not resuscitate, now called the post. And I've witnessed it actually as a nurse. Some of these young doctors, they want to save everybody and think everybody, should be saved to the bitter end. And for the people that want that, that's perfect. But for the people that don't, they have the right to choose. So your advocate really can help mediate with family to help you express your wishes. Next. So there may be resistance, right, to having the conversation. And it's pretty common. For examples, Mom, I don't see what good it does to talk about such things. It's all in God's hands. Dad, I already know you don't want any heroic measures if things are really bad. There's nothing more we need to discuss. We'll do the right thing if the situation arises. Well, what exactly does that no more heroic measures mean? It could mean different things to different people. I just can't talk about this. It's too painful, and talking about it just makes it more likely that it will happen. Like, you don't want to bring it into the universe, right? And who is resistant, you or your loved one, or both? Because sometimes it's the person that really needs these documents that's resisting even more than the family. So how do we respond to that? Well, Mom, I don't see what good it does to talk about such, response. Next slide. You want to be firm and straightforward. I know this makes you feel uncomfortable, but I need you to listen to hear what I have to say. Yes, death is in God's hands, but how we live until then is in our hands, and I need to talk about it. I understand it's overwhelming for you right now, but let's make an appointment then for a time to discuss this soon. That maybe gives them a little bit of time to adjust to the fact that it needs to be addressed. Point out the possible consequences of not talking now. You know, if we don't talk about this, we could end up in a situation that is much more uncomfortable. And that is so true. And, you know, it can divide families. They may not speak for a while or ever again. And, you know, it can just get really ugly. Ask someone to be your spokesperson, a neutral person that knows what you want and can help facilitate the discussion. Next. So I just always like to talk also a little bit about palliative and hospice care, because these are things that are options at the end of life. And in fact, palliative can be at any time of life. So next, what are they? Well, palliative care is the medical specialty focused on relief of pain, stress, and other debilitating symptoms of serious illness. It is not dependent on prognosis and can be delivered at the same time as treatment that is meant to cure. And many do not progress to hospice. They go back to living a fine, healthy life. So it can be done even at the same time as actual treatment to cure. Hospice, though, is designed to give care to people in their final phase of a terminal illness and focuses on comfort and quality of life rather than the cure or the treatment. And a doctor has to do their best guesstimate to say that they have 6 months or less to live. Now, do some people live longer than 6 months in hospice? Absolutely. But as long as they continue to decline, you know, it would be a covered service under Medicare, commercial insurances, and I believe even Medicaid covers hospice care. So the goal, of course, is to enable patients to be comfortable and free of pain, if at all possible. They can use aggressive pain control. Doctors aren't worried about addiction at this point, right? So it's okay to use those opiates. Emotional, social, and spiritual needs are part of treating the patient and their loved ones. And then they even continue with the family after death and check in to offer, you know, some grief support. So generally services are home-based, but there are some freestanding facilities and sometimes a hospice bed in a hospital. And assisted living and nursing homes also allow hospice staff in to care for the patient. And usually these facilities contract with particular hospice companies, but you know, you can probably always work with them. And if you have another preference, hopefully they would honor that. But it's something to check before you go into those facilities if this is important to you. I personally am a huge advocate for hospice, for people being comfortable and keeping their dignity, and that they don't want to just, you know, continue to be poked and prodded. Although, like I said, if people choose that, that is their right to do that. I actually worked home health and hospice for 6 years along my nursing career. My father was in hospice. We treated my mother like she was in hospice, you know, because we weren't going to do any unnecessary tests or treatment because she already had dementia and certain things she had already expressed when she could that she didn't want But I had met Elizabeth Kubler-Ross as a nursing student. We all went to her home, actually. She wrote the book on death and dying, the stages, the 5 stages of grief for the dying. And so, that really influenced me as a young person and a young nursing student. Next. There's an unspoken dark side of American medicine, keeping patients alive at any price. 2/3 of Americans die in healthcare institutions, tethered to machines and tubes at bankrupting costs, even though research shows that most people prefer to die at home in comfort, surrounded by loved ones. The other thing is Medicare has this statistic that the most Medicare dollars a person spends are within those last 6 months of life, because they're probably going in and out of the hospital. So it's something to think about. Do you want a good death? And only you can define what that means to you, what you would perceive as a good death. Next. So there are a few helpful places to go to kind of help you decide what your values are, how you want to see your end of life wishes. One of them are cards called Go Wish that you can order. I have the websites here on this page, and they look like regular deck of cards, but they give you all kinds of topics to think about: to have an advocate who knows my values and priorities, to die at home, to pray, to be at peace with God, to say goodbye to important people in my life, to have human touch, to be able to talk about what scares me. So there's a bunch of these, okay? And it just kind of gives you food for thought and help prioritize. The next thing is a workbook called Compassion and Choices, My End of Life Decisions. Now you can go to their website, which is here, compassionandchoices.org, and order a free copy. It's pretty thorough. This one's very thorough. It also includes that dementia addendum I spoke about, and it also includes kind of an agreement with an assisted living that they're going to honor your wishes. Because believe it or not, some people have things set up and then they choose a facility that for whatever reason isn't willing or able to carry out some of those wishes. Then the other one is called 5 Wishes. This one's been around for a really long time. And again, the website is agingwithdignity.org. And it talks about, again, the 5 wishes: the person I want to make care decisions when I can't, kind of med treatment I want or don't, how comfortable I want to be, how I want people to treat me, what I want my loved ones to know. So, and again, it describes things, defines things, and both of these workbooks, and it also gives you plenty of blank lines to fill in the blanks. And then the last slide is just resources that I've used to come up with this program. And then it would be time for questions or comments.
Well, thank you, Maureen. That was actually very, very helpful.
Oh, good.
I do plan to pick up a number of those materials. I do have a question. So it sounds like some of these workbooks, do they contain the forms that need to be completed, or do you need to go see an attorney for those?
Well, I believe you can pull off like POA paperwork as well as the post off the IDPH website.
Okay.
My recommendation, though, is to go to an elder care attorney because they look at the whole picture, but also their paperwork is much more detailed than the standard form that you pull off the website.
Yeah, no, I got you. Because I know we had used an elder care attorney earlier with my family. I was just wondering because they're kind of expensive with paying the bills.
I know, I know, that is the unfortunate side, but I guess the old adage is true. You get what you pay for.
Yeah, no, and again, that becomes the concern is because you
Right.
see places you can they're like, file, upload your thing. And I'm like, well, who would even go there and who would trust that?
Well, and that's why the key is you have to distribute to the people that need to have these once you do get it, and keep the original in a safe place, so it doesn't get lost or destroyed. So that, you have the proof. And if for some reason, especially if you're a young person and you start out doing, POAs and a living will, you're bound to make changes through the years, right? Your viewpoint's going to change, your values may change. The people that you first chose may not turn out to be the best choices, so things can happen. That's why we recommend, especially the earlier you've developed these, you review them periodically.
Yeah. No, and I thought you had a really interesting point about why young adults need to do this paperwork and especially have a POA. I never really thought about that. I just always, like you said, in Illinois, they have the, automatic order, but I imagine there's still some challenges with getting that established. So if, say, one of your children's in a car accident, I can't even help my son out anymore or my daughter with calling the doctor.
Exactly. And that's why at least the HIPAA form, if nothing else, where you can at least communicate with the doctor in the hospital, because you could call the hospital and they're not going to even admit, tell you if they're there.
Oh, yeah, no. Yeah,
but you're right. I was very lucky. My kids are adults, long into adulthood, but I never gave it a thought either when they went to college.
Yeah, well, I got 20 and 26 and daughter's getting ready to have a baby and, I'm thinking, man, she needs to be.
And she also needs to be setting it up because now she's going to be bringing that baby, into the world, right? And again, strange things happen. Horrible things can happen to good people.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that was very, very informative. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me.